Welcome to Expat Lens, a podcast that explores the international experience and life in Japan. I'm your host, Jack Xavier. Today's episode is special because it marks a few milestones. It's the first episode of Season 2, and it's our first full episode with video. My guest today is a young entrepreneur who took her big ideas from the Japanese countryside and brought them into the capital. Stick around to find out more and take another look through the Expat Lens. Hello and welcome back to another installment of Expat Lens. As always, I'm Jack Xavier. My guest today is an entrepreneur and a member of the international community in Tokyo. She's the founder of Creeba and a personal branding and UX, user experience, design expert who has the illustrious experience of speaking at TEDx Waseda, a very prestigious university here in Tokyo. I'm sure that we're going to get a lot of key insights about what it takes to analyze your strengths and market yourself, especially here in Japan and in Tokyo. And I'm very happy to welcome this new friend, Annie. Annie, thanks for coming on to Expat Lens.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
Thank you. Let's start, as always, at the beginning. Would you like to share a personal introduction? Maybe tell us anything that I missed that you'd like to include. And then also tell us what brought you to Japan originally.
Okay. Well, where should I begin? Well, please call me Annie. That's what everyone calls me in Japan. But I'm originally from Vietnam, so I also have a Vietnamese name. You can butcher it however you like, but the proper way to say it is Hoang Vũ Thiên Phu.
Hoang Vu Ting Shu?
Yeah. Phu.
Shu?
Yeah. Yes, like a little smile at the end.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I've been in Japan. This is my 6th year here. Oh my gosh.
How does that make you feel? Did 6 years pass quickly?
Well, I was here during COVID, so I felt like that 2-3 years of my life didn't really count. So I would say there's still so much to explore. I
Sure.
was in the countryside of Japan,
Mm.
actually for university, and moved to Tokyo in 2022 March.
Okay.
So I'm still kind of newbie, but also adjusting to life in Tokyo.
Mm.
So there's still so much to explore.
Where were you living before you came to Tokyo?
Oita.
Oita. Oita Prefecture is in Kyushu, right?
Kyushu,
Okay,
yes.
yes.
We're very well known for hot spring, karage, and my university.
Right. Isn't it like chicken namban or something
Oh
like
my
that?
gosh, yeah.
Yeah,
Chicken
yeah,
namba.
yeah. I had a very good experience in Beppu.
Yeah, that's where I was
Oh.
for university.
Oh, that's
for-
great. Cool.
Yeah.
I thought it's a very cute town. It's very charming and it has this big
Yes.
hill with all of the like onsen and stuff on
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, my school was on top of the mountain, and I live at the bottom of the mountain.
Not great.
Yeah, so I originally came here for
Mm,
studies,
mm.
for doing business.
Mm.
And how I decided on studying in Japan was
Mm.
that back in high school, I was volunteering at a research project with Keio University.
Mm.
So I was acting as a interpreter, like Vietnamese, English, and a little bit of Japanese.
Wow.
In high school. Yeah. I did that for almost 3 years. And it was a very profound discovery for me. Through that research, I interacted with professors and students coming from Japan to Vietnam. And at that point, they didn't speak any Vietnamese, yet they were so committed to coming from Japan to Vietnam every year, twice a year, to help build a school for disabled children in central Vietnam. And I think that perseverance to explore a completely new culture, to immerse themselves in a language they don't speak, yet still able to communicate with the local people, like even doing like homestay or doing interview with the families, staying with the family for like entire week. I thought, as a 14-year-old girl, like that was a very different world for me. So I really wanted to put myself in an environment where I feel uncomfortable, but also excited to immerse myself in that new environment. So inspired by my interaction with the students, I decided to come to Japan.
Nice. Okay, so these people came to your country and you had this very impactful impression about how proactive they were in engaging in a culture that they weren't used to and trying to communicate. And make connections there. I see. Okay. What was your experience like when you first came to Japan? Did you see yourself reflected in those visitors to your country when you came here?
Hmm. Can you paraphrase the question a bit?
So, could you really feel maybe like a closer connection with the
Mm,
people who came to Vietnam?
mm,
And, they were going through experience where they didn't speak any
mm,
Vietnamese, but they were still trying to build this school, for
mm,
example, right? And you came to Japan originally to study, but was there any like language barrier or cultural barrier that you
mm.
originally encountered there?
Okay. So a thing about me is that I get really geek up if I'm interested in something.
Okay.
So when I decided that I wanted to go to Japan,
Mm.
I spent 3 years in high school studying Japanese,
Oh.
uh, researching about the school,
Mm.
researching about the country. I think I know Japanese geography quite well. Even from the school, before I
Mm.
entered it, I was already speaking to school alumni, professor, to know what's
Mm.
happening in the school, what do students actually do outside of school.
Mm. Mm.
So I did an extensive research before coming,
Mm.
and there are pros and cons to that. The pros was that I jumped straight into the community. Like
Mm.
language was not a problem. I knew the city inside out. It's a very small city.
Mm.
Um, I kind of knew what classes I wanted to take from first year. So that was a really good part about being prepared. However, I was too prepared.
Too prepared.
Too
Okay.
prepared.
How is that?
So when I came, because I already knew a big part of the city, a lot
Mm.
of people, I didn't feel waku waku, like excited.
Okay.
So I feel like I was too prepared. So what else is there for me to explore? So in my first year, I kind of had that regret that maybe I shouldn't have done too much research.
Need to keep a little bit of mystery
Yeah,
still. Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
So after I realized that, it's good to do your research, but it's good to be spontaneous as well.
Mm.
That's when I started to think, okay, what can I do differently
Mm.
in addition to the things that I already knew and feel comfortable with?
Mm. 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 I see. And so you kind of had a very strong image of Japan before you came here then, because
Mm.
you studied the language, you did your research. Um, Even so, though, was there anything that after you came you were surprised about, or to put it another way, like we had kind of a pre-discussion
Mm.
about your impressions before and after, and you had some very interesting comments there as well. But I don't want to say like culture shock, but was there something that you're like, oh, I expected this, but actually it was like that?
Oh, interesting. Um, I expected people to be very warm and welcome.
Mm.
Because actually, before coming to Japan to study, I came here for travel. And at that time, I didn't speak any Japanese. But while I was taking the train from the station to my hotel, I got lost. And then I asked a random stranger on the
Mm.
train.
Mm.
And to my surprise, the stranger actually got off the train with
Yeah,
me
yeah.
and took me to my Airbnb.
Yeah, I've heard this story so many times. It's wild. Like, oh, you need to go to this place? I'll take you there. It's like, do you live around there? No, no, no. I live an hour
Yeah.
away. You're like, what?
Exactly. So I definitely came with the expectation that people are going to welcome me.
Mm.
And there is a very big sense of omotenashi hospitality,
Mm. Mm.
and maybe a bit of a pay it forward, which is a value that really resonate with me,
Mm.
and kind of like a big why in me. Like whatever I'm doing professionally and personally, it goes back to giving back to the community.
Mm.
So when I came to Japan, I found myself being immersing myself to the local community more than at school.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
So I thought
Interesting.
academia was something that I didn't really pay attention to because I found myself more excited to work with local people, such
Mm.
as organizing hot spring festival. Yeah,
Mm.
because Oita is very famous for hot spring. I did a lot of cultural exchange, so I did a lot of farming and trying to come up with projects to rejuvenate the old town.
Mm. Mm.
So I found myself loving Japan in the more smaller corner of the world,
I
something
see.
much more local.
I have a
Mm,
question about this
okay.
now because you're describing what I see as and feel as a very romantic image of the countryside of
Yeah.
Japan that still exists today. It's a stereotype, but it's also true, right? It still exists. This kind of these small communities, very tight knit, but can be welcoming,
Mm,
certainly. And then many Japanese people, from what I understand, when you first come to Tokyo, and they have a special word for it,
mm.
right? It's called Jokyo, like going up to the
Oh,
capital.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Mm,
So, like a lot of young people, especially after they
mm,
graduate university, they get a job in Tokyo. So they go up to the capital. And then they have this, I would say, domestic culture
mm,
shock where they're like,
exactly.
oh, Tokyo is so different from where I grew up.
Mm,
And I think we can say that you had this experience of growing up a little
mm,
bit in a more countryside style of Japan.
mm.
How did you feel coming to Tokyo for the first time?
My gosh, this brings back so many trauma
Oh,
in
no!
me.
Tell us the
Uh,
juicy details.
yeah, when I first came to Tokyo, it was for an internship.
Mm,
Um, and well, I did multiple internships in Tokyo, so I've been here like a couple of times before actually moving. And how to say? When I first came here, I realized that people are not as welcoming as the oji-san, like the grandpa and grandma
yeah.
at the bakery, like in Beppu. So when I got the apartment for a really short time, I was only staying here for
Mm,
3 weeks. Out of the 3 weeks, I didn't go out for the first 2 weeks.
really?
Yeah, it
Was that because you were feeling uncomfortable in the big city, or you just that kind of shock of people being a little bit more cold and closed made you want to just
mm,
stay away from it, or
it felt like there were I needed to give in too much effort that I was not mentally prepared for.
mm,
For example, when going out, I had to think about what should I wear today,
mm.
how do I coordinate myself, because when I first came to Tokyo, I went to Shibuya,
Ah, okay.
and oh my gosh, how shocked I was when everyone was so fashionable, wearing the latest trends, layering, and doing their makeup and their hair. Whereas in the countryside, you can just wear your pajama to Family Mart and no one would judge you.
Right, right.
And I love that, being that authentic self, being like
Mm,
very comfortable in my own shoes. When I first came to Tokyo, I was a bit overwhelmed.
mm.
It can be overwhelmed, not just like mentally, but also physically overwhelming.
There is certainly a lot of pressure to kind of keep up appearances, so to
Mm.
speak, within Tokyo. I think it's probably easier for men. Like men can kind of get away with whatever they want, but like particularly women in Tokyo, it's as you say, like when they go out, they're full makeup,
Mm.
nice clothes, very well presented, have a handbag, right? So, um, did you feel that particularly as a woman in Japan? Like you need to be very conscious of the way you present yourself visually?
And I think subconsciously it was in my mind.
Mm,
And then I started overthinking too much.
okay.
And as a result, I just decided to stay home.
No.
Yeah.
It's too troublesome. It's too mendokusai to go
Yeah,
out. I
for sure. But I do understand like the concept of Jokyo,
hmm,
because even though I love the closeness of like the countryside part
hmm,
of Japan, all of the the gems, all of the resources, all of the networks, all of the community are in Tokyo or the metropolitan cities, and that's something
yeah.
that I really struggle with when I was in the countryside of Japan.
Hmm,
there were there wasn't a lot of option for me, especially when I was studying business. People around me expected, oh, she's gonna be a consultant, or she's gonna work for like a bank, or like something to do with
hmm,
business. But I wanted to do something more in business. I went to business school because I wanted that business mindset. But I do enjoy creating things in
hmm,
addition to the business aspect. I remember in my marketing class, I would always volunteer to make the PowerPoint slides
hmm,
or to come up with a marketing pitch. So I wanted to do something that can combine, like my business background, but also like my creates passion for creating
hmm.
and communication. And in my school, no one was talking about how you can go outside and try to make something new for yourself.
Mm.
So that's one of the demerits of being in Japan. You're too comfortable, and unconsciously you lock yourself in with very limited or already determined options for yourself.
That's extremely interesting. I was having a conversation the other day, which was along the same lines as what you're saying here. But it's kind of connected to this idea of the foreigner bubble, the gaijin
Mm,
bubble. Like you can live your whole life, not your whole life, but you can live basically your adult life in Japan in this small bubble, only speaking English and only interacting with other foreigners. And I always found that to be really kind of a shame, right? Like, because why are you here then? Like, there's all these
mm,
opportunities and there's all these very interesting people that you can connect with and meet. And what you're saying suggests to me that that's actually a phenomena within Japan with Japanese people as well.
mm,
Am I misinterpreting your words here? Like you can kind of just stay safe and comfortable in your little town,
mm,
and you don't have to go out. You don't have to really think too much about the
mm,
the greater world. Maybe this isn't just a Japanese thing, but um, I've certainly been exploring this idea
mm.
more recently.
For sure. Well, I think not just Japan, but
Mm,
even in Vietnam as well.
mm,
Like
mm,
if you go to a specific primary school, it's probably connected to a high school that you go to.
mm.
You go to a specific high school in the district, and then follow that,
Right.
university and then a job. It's
Mm,
very linear.
mm,
And going back to like the reason why I came to Japan was that I was baffled by how these Japanese students were willing to open up their comfort zone,
mm,
stepping out of their comfort zone to explore something different. So that that realization was something that I carried with me throughout my university life, to
mm,
always trying to find ways to reinvent myself or to go outside of what I already know. I do have to point out that even though it is comfortable living in the countryside, there are so many opportunities for you to think about who you want to be in the countryside. I tell this to my teachers and my kohais that
mm,
I feel Beppu, the city I was in, is like a blank canvas. It's very mundane, everything is set in stone. So it's really up to you how you want to paint that canvas out.
mm,
Uh, so even though life was very peaceful and calm, I do find myself finding ways to bring colors into that blank canvas, and that has brought me,
mm.
going to Canada for exchange, moving to Tokyo for internship, finding the career that really suits me without categorizing myself into like A or B.
I see. I see. Interesting. As we are on the topic of careers and work,
Mm.
what are your thoughts on Japanese work culture, working in Japan in general?
Hmm. Interesting.
Mhm.
My working experiences are limited. Well, I'm still working at my first official
Mm,
company, but my working experience started when I was in first year.
mm,
That's when I got my first internship that brought me to Tokyo for like a month. Um, I would say I'm my background is working for startups and smaller company until my first job. Uh, and I think when it comes to startup, it's very scrappy,
yes. Yeah.
and I love and I don't and I hate being scrappy. I love it because it's up to me to
Mm,
determine like how much work I want to put in, um, how I want to approach the problem, how I want to solve it, who I want to work with, to bring the ideas into life.
mm,
So I'm not sure about other countries because I haven't had that experience yet. But for the startups that I worked with, which were mostly um, led by foreigners, I do find it to be a
mm,
very
mm.
comfortable environment, for exploration and getting things done very quickly.
I see.
Mm,
Interesting. And you also told me earlier that you feel like there's a high barrier for entry for young foreign talent at entry level jobs.
mm,
Um, did do you feel this way based on your own experiences, or is this something that you've observed? And I,
mm.
I was curious about. Could you give us a little
Yeah,
more details?
for sure.
Mm,
Um, why I said that was because of my job as a UX UI designer
Okay.
with no UX UI background.
Mhm.
So when I tried to look for internships, I did it the scrappy way. I
Mm,
cold emailed, I applied for a volunteer
mm,
position. They weren't even hiring a UX designer, but I just pitched myself in.
mm, mm,
And they really enjoyed my personality and my mindset on how I work and
mm,
how
mm,
problems can be approached and solved.
mm,
So they were very risk taking. They were willing to offer me a position or an opportunity um, to join their team because our mindset aligned and our values aligned. And with being in a more smaller organization startup, um, there were more ownership. However, the cons to that is that you don't really, because maybe you're the only intern there, which I was. There's no one to benchmark yourself to. Um, you work your ass off. You
mm,
try to, propose ideas. You get feedback a lot, but you don't have anyone to compare your quality of work to.
mm,
So it's a bit easier to find those opportunity. But what happens is after you get those opportunity, how do you evaluate yourself on a professional level? That was something that I found in working at startup.
mm.
So when I realized that I'm very new to this career and I need a mentor and I need like a proper
Yeah.
career track, I found established Japanese company like Nikkei more um, suitable because
Mm,
in Japan the Kenshu system, the Shintotsu Kenshu,
mhm.
so new grads hiring and training system is very very structured and very very well
Indeed.
organized.
Yeah.
So when I joined my company, um, I had a really good time to learn everything from scratch. They taught me how to do engineering, even though I had no background.
Mm,
So I realized that if you are just starting out,
mm.
uh, and if you want guidance or if you want evaluation on how you should grow in the first 1 to 3 years, then Japanese companies are really good. Yeah.
I do agree with
Mm.
that analysis. I
Yeah.
think the idea in Japan when hiring new people is based more on the concept of potential and
Mm.
investing in
Yeah.
people. And this can be a little bit frustrating, I found in
Mm.
my experiences, because when you go in, there might not actually be that much training. I don't know if
Mm.
this was your
Yeah.
experience, but for me, it was kind of just like, well, it's going to take you about a year or so just to adjust anyway. So, like,
Mm.
don't worry about it. I'm like, yeah, but I'm hungry. Like, give me
Yeah.
something to do.
Mm.
Right. And they're just like, no, no, just you'll kind of absorb it just by being in the
Yeah.
environment. Do you feel that that's a correct analysis?
Yes, and
Mm.
I think that's partially why the hiring process for Japanese companies are so overly complicated. They
Mm.
really place emphasis on your shiboroki. So
Mm.
why do you want to work for the company?
Mm.
What values do you think you have that's gonna contribute to the company?
Right.
So they look for culture fit.
Yeah, exactly right. It's like almost 100% culture fit
Yeah.
because you're coming from a university, you have
Mm.
no skills,
Mm.
possibly. So there's like, we want blank slate
Mm.
people that we can mold.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's where the discussion comes, culture fit. But as a foreigner, how can I fit in entirely to that culture?
Mm,
So that's where I feel for new grads, especially
mm,
international students, it would be great if they can actually fit into the culture.
mm,
But I
mm.
argue that you will never be 100% fit for for any company. So how I approached the problem was that doing what I was most comfortable with, being impressing people with my personality and work mindset.
Mm.
I approached the team um, by creating meaningful connection and proving myself through the internship. And as a result, I didn't have to go through the hiring process. I got employed from my internship.
There's certainly a lot of different ways that you can get around this highly structured system
Mm,
that you mentioned. This is another topic that I've been kind of wrestling with internally recently. This idea that you have kind of the benefit of being a foreigner in
mm,
Japan because they're like, well, usually when you go into a company, you have to do an entrance exam or something, right? Or an
mm,
assessment. But if you're a foreigner, they're like, oh, maybe it's a little bit too hard for you, so you don't have to worry about
mm,
that. which maybe you do the spoken interview, but the written one you get a
Mm,
pass on. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit of a shame because you're, to an extent, being coddled. Like, yes,
mm,
Japanese language is very difficult, and especially reading and writing for many foreigners, even if they speak fluently, that's kind of one of the hurdles that's hard to overcome. But it's a blessing and a curse. Maybe you can get into these job positions that you're interested in
mm,
by going around it or finding different methods, as you mentioned, right? Starting as an internship or just like kind
mm,
of building relationships, which is very important in Japan. But at the same time, struggling a little bit, I've begun to feel like I kind of wish I struggled more,
mm,
because learning Japanese is a lifelong objective.
mm,
Speaking of which, like, how do you feel it is communicating in Japanese versus communicating in English professionally? Do you
mm.
usually use Japanese at work, or do you usually use English?
No, I use full English at work.
Mm,
Um, so professionally, I use English
mm,
because our development team are, the majority of them are foreigner. But at work, in order to grow at work, not only you have to showcase your skills, but your technical skills, but also your soft skills.
mm,
And especially if you work in a Japanese environment, if you're catering to Japanese customer and audience, if you speak the language, you can understand their viewpoint.
mm,
I think that empathy is really important, not just between company to customer, but inside the company, employee to employee.
mm,
So I do find myself trying to use Japanese to communicate with the members on a more personal level,
mm,
especially when like a new joiner comes, or if there's like a new grad joining. I was in their shoe before. It was
mm,
very scary as a new grad. So at least I want to make the first move to reach out to them.
mhm.
And a way to do that is to welcome them in something that feels familiar, which is like their like mother tongue.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
How do you feel? It sounds to me like the story that you've told us up until this point is that you're quite good at connecting with people, and you speak Japanese, and you've had this small village experience, not village, but like small town experience,
Yeah.
right? And then Japan, big city, Tokyo experience. How do you feel it is connecting with Japanese people in general? Is it difficult? Was it easier in Beppu versus Tokyo? What are the reasons for that? And do you have any like advice
Mm,
about how to connect with people easier? This is one of the things that I hear a lot of people say. It's like, I really like Japan. I'm so interested in it, but I have so much trouble connecting with Japanese people.
mm. Okay, so this is my observation and also my hypothesis.
Please.
I think Japanese people are very talented at very specific things.
I'd agree with that.
So
Mm,
if you can bring that nerdiness, that geekiness, that passion out of them, yeah, connect with them on something very personal and something that they're passionate about. Um, I think it was the same when I was in like Beppu.
mm.
People there spoke Oitaben.
Ah,
Mm. Uh, so if I spoke um, standardized Japanese, I would get like a very formal majime response. But
I see.
if I speak a little bit of Oitaben to them, they would add like two or three sentences extra to their responses to me.
Interesting.
So likewise, when I connect with people professionally,
Mm,
of course, for example, everyone is a designer, everyone is a developer, but what are they interested in particular about their work that they do?
mm,
So, for example, I met a developer working at a Japanese company, and he's Japanese,
mm,
and he's very shy. But after like nudging him around, asking him about his background, what he did in university, I found out that he's an avid Minecraft creator
oh,
who's been playing Minecraft for the past 10 years
mm,
and creating he even has his own YouTube channel teaching people how to do Minecraft and develop like their own cities or their buildings
mm,
inside. And once I kind of cracked,
mm-hmm,
like we went on and talking about game development
mm,
because of his passion for Minecraft, he's
mm.
now developing his own game.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So we end up talking about 2-3 hours on game development, and he even bounced off ideas with me as a UX designer on how to improve the experience in gaming for people. So I think when my approach to creating meaningful connection is trying to deep dive under um, people's biography or demographics, try to understand what makes them happy, what makes them go crazy talking about for hours, and not just for Japanese culture. I think that works for any culture in general.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think that's a really good, just advice in general, as you say. While we're also touching upon that topic, and you mentioned that keyword UX design, this is sort of your wheelhouse. This is your expertise. Do you think that there's anything unique or kind of special about Japanese approach to user experience? I saw the YouTube video the other day talking about how the design of websites in Japan is so radically different from what people see in the West. And it's kind of like lots of information. It feels very cluttered if you're used to looking at a streamlined design. Um, I guess that's kind of related to your work, but can you give us any insights on that? And is there like a method to the madness, so to speak? I don't mind it at all. I've been in Japan for a long time, so I'm kind of used to it. But
yeah, so at my job, I work for a global product,
okay,
unfortunately. So
unfortunately,
my domain knowledge is in global products. So, thinking about how the West design their mobile application or website, our designs are definitely more sleek compared to the Japanese products. So we have like a domestic product and the global product.
Okay.
And they're completely different.
They are different.
They are very different.
What's the biggest difference between the two?
I think it's the information architecture. So how you display information to the user. Was Japanese products and Japanese user, they need a lot of security. They need a lot of guarantee. When they look for information, the reason why there's so many information on the website is that it needs to provide the user some sort of safetyness that I know that if I press on this button, I'm gonna be expecting like all of the information that's gonna protect me or gonna make me feel safe to engage with the product.
Interesting.
Whereas, for example, for global products, if it's like the more straightforward it is, the simpler it is, the faster and seamless it takes me from point A to point B, I'm pretty happy with that.
Would you say then, let's try to tie these two ideas together. Would you say then, in your experience, it's better to be very open and very forthcoming with like information about yourself and talk a lot about yourself when you're trying to build relationships with Japanese people to build that kind of information safety net? It's like, look, I know I'm a foreigner, but let me give you this big information dump. Now you can trust me because you know what I am. I just thought of that right now, but like, do you have any feelings about that?
I think in Japan there's a concept of kukyo yomu.
Sure, reading the room. Yeah, right.
So I think there are a lot of introverts in Japan.
I would say, yeah, there's a lot.
So, I mean, there are two ways you can do about it. Try to understand their point of view, try to accommodate for their needs, which is like the slow and steady way, or introduce something to them that is so vastly different yet so interesting that it would make them curious to know about you more. So I know some people with really loud, interesting personality, they can really their existence in the room is very clear, and maybe some people find it interesting that this person is so knowledgeable about the topic, or I love this personality, so I want to talk to that person more. That is one. Or the other way, which I prefer, is like trying to take my time and slowly crack the person I'm talking to.
That's very interesting. I think probably the advice that I would lean towards is what you're suggesting. But it did kind of unlock a memory for me because a very close Japanese friend of mine said when he's meeting someone new, he does that. And I thought it was really weird. I'm like, you're talking a lot about yourself, man. Like, are you sure this is okay? It's like,
Mm,
yeah, because I want that person to feel safe.
mm,
I want them to know what I am. I'm like,
mm,
okay, it's
mm.
very curious. And you just reminded me of that. It was great. So,
I think for Japanese people, it would be great if they
mm,
can speak more about themselves and have confidence in themselves.
mm,
Uh, and maybe for foreigners, maybe we should practice our active listening and try to harmonize our
mm.
personality and how we put ourselves out there with how the other person wants to receive.
I really like that, actually. I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about your future vision and your future goals in Japan. I'm sorry, we didn't really talk too much
Mm,
about Krieba, but would you
mm,
like to tell us about this product service
mm.
company that you have and like
Sure.
where you want to go with it?
Yeah. So I can talk about how it happened
Okay.
in the first place. So it is a cause that's very close to my heart, which started in Beppu, uh, the town of nothingness and blank canvas. Um, I realized that there are so many talented young talents out there. Not just me, but the students that I were doing TA for, my classmates, and they wanted to do something beyond what they study in
Mm,
school.
mm,
A lot of them are very creative. They want to start their own NGO. They want to build their own exhibition, but they're lacking the resources. And more importantly, they lack the confidence
mm,
because they're very in their mindset that if I study this, I need to work something directly related to it.
mm, mm,
Where and every because I'm in this small town, I'm very limited to the resources I have and whatever my senpai has done. Probably that's the best way to
mm,
move myself forward. But from my own experience, um, first you need to have confidence in yourself, because when you are confident that this is something you want to explore, you become curious about the topic. You're gonna do extensive research. You're gonna get that experience through projects and learning, and you're gonna find ways to connect yourself
mm,
with your future self
mm, mm,
and find
mm.
resources. So Kriaba started as Kriaba means create basho.
Basho,
Yeah,
place, right? Creative place, kind of. Yeah.
creative place,
Mm,
a creative space for
mm, mm,
creative people to find their
mm.
creative
Very
confidence.
nice.
So still very new to this the idea of Kriaba, still
Mm,
exploring ways we can approach it. But currently, we are an educational platform that provides workshop, project-based learning, and skills to help creative people
mm,
to find ways to express
mm.
themselves and help them pursue that creative goal that they have.
I see. And you do this by gathering talent and doing like as you say workshops. So you organize workshops regularly or
Yes,
okay.
actually, I've been doing workshops since 2019
Wow.
when I
Okay.
was a student. After attending an online workshop on
Mm,
design thinking,
mm,
my whole viewpoint changed because I realized that I don't have to choose to be a business person because I have a business background.
mm,
I can choose to become something more creative,
mm,
and I know that there are some tools that I can learn out there. So after joining that workshop, I wanted to bring that kind of workshop, very hands-on learning,
mm,
so people can explore what
mm,
works for them and what doesn't.
mm.
So Kriaba is like an extension of my personal project in the past 5 years.
I see.
Yeah.
And where do you want to take it in the future in
Mm.
Japan?
Not just Japan. I want to take it outside of the into the world. Um, my mindset is that um, Japan is a really great place if you want to get started. There's a lot of
Mm,
resources. Well, for Kriaba especially, we want to democratize education and resources from metropolitan city. So going away from the idea that is focused on location,
mm,
but focusing on the people. So if the audience is someone who's passionate to pursue their goal, someone who's motivated to find those resources and learning,
mm,
then we want to provide that opportunity to them. So for Kriaba, it can start from Japan.
mm,
The quality of education, the expertise we have here, the expat community,
mm,
it's very
mm.
rich resources. But we want to bring those resources to people who want to learn and who want to experience, not just in Tokyo, but probably Beppu, Nagoya, and even in Southeast Asia as well.
That sounds like an excellent goal, and I'm really excited to see how far you can push it and where it goes in the future. We're almost out of time for today, though,
Okay.
unfortunately.
It feels so fast.
Yeah, I know, right? It it goes by very quickly. And I had a lot of fun speaking with you, and I think you had some really great, insightful comments. But before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or anything else that you want to address or throw out there? You can do a shameless plug, you can mention other things. It's completely up to you.
Whoa, okay. Okay, I need to think about this. Well, I think it comes back to what I said in the beginning. Come to Japan with an open mind. Like to learn from not my mistake, but learn from my preparation. It's good to
Mm,
be prepared, but
definitely.
be open to whatever comes in your way. Whether it is finding a community, joining a Kriaba workshop, meeting like-minded people. Keep like be open to whatever comes in your way, and then you'll be able to draw up the Japan version that you want to live
Mm,
in, rather than like trying to make it experiencing stereotype for yourself or trying to fit into the culture.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And on that note, let's wrap up for today. Annie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And once again, I'm Jack Xavier. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Expat Lens. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.